Next, we move to specification number 6, which requires us to describe a reflex action as a quick and automatic response to a stimulus. In this process, a stimulus first occurs and is detected by a receptor. The receptor then generates an electrical impulse that travels through a sensory neuron to the spinal cord, which is part of the central nervous system. Within the CNS, the impulse is passed to an interneuron or relay neuron, which transfers the signal to a motor neuron. The motor neuron carries the impulse to an effector, such as a muscle or gland, which produces the response. A reflex arc is the body's natural, automatic, and extremely fast response to a stimulus. This built-in protective mechanism is known as a reflex action, which helps the body react quickly without conscious thought. To understand this better, consider a simple situation. A receptor, such as a pain receptor in the skin, first detects a stimulus. This stimulus immediately produces an electrical impulse that travels through a sensory neuron toward the central nervous system, usually the spinal cord. Inside the spinal cord, the impulse is passed to a relay neuron, which connects the sensory neuron to a motor neuron. The impulse is then transmitted along the motor neuron to an effector, which may be a muscle or a gland. The effector produces the final response, such as muscle contraction that quickly pulls the hand away from danger. In sequence, the pathway involves a stimulus, which is detected by a receptor. The impulse then travels through the sensory neuron, passes through the relay neuron in the spinal cord, continues through the motor neuron, reaches the effector, and produces the response. Now again, just another example. This diagram shows a reflex arc, which is a very fast and automatic response to a stimulus. In this example, the stimulus is a pinprick on the leg. The moment the pin touches the skin, receptor cells in the leg detect the stimulus and generate an electrical impulse. This impulse travels along a sensory neuron toward the spinal cord, which is part of the central nervous system. Inside the spinal cord, the impulse passes to a relay neuron, which connects the sensory neuron to a motor neuron. The motor neuron then carries the impulse to the effector, in this case, a muscle in the leg. The muscle contracts, pulling the leg away from the pin almost immediately. At the same time, an impulse is sent to the brain to make us aware of what happened. However, the brain does not control this immediate response. This is why reflex actions are so quick and protective. They happen automatically to prevent injury before we even have time to think. The reflex arc is a rapid, automatic, and protective neural pathway that allows the body to respond immediately to a stimulus. It works without conscious thought, bypassing the brain to produce a quick reaction. The pathway follows a specific sequence: stimulus, receptor, sensory neuron, relay neuron, motor neuron, effector, and response. The stimulus is any change in the environment, such as heat, pain, or pressure. Specialized receptors, like sensory cells in the skin, detect the stimulus and convert it into an electrical impulse. This impulse is then transmitted along a sensory neuron to the central nervous system, CNS. Within the CNS, a relay neuron located in the spinal cord acts as a connector, passing the impulse from the sensory neuron to a motor neuron. The motor neuron then carries the impulse from the CNS to an effector, which can be a muscle or gland. Finally, the effector produces the response, such as a muscle contracting to pull a hand away from a hot object. This entire process occurs automatically and rapidly, providing immediate protection and helping the body avoid injury.